Welcome to Mapping the Self. I'm Selena Garofino. Know thyself was carved into stone at the entrance of Apollo's temple at Delphi in ancient Greece. Scholars, poets, philosophers have debated the big questions around what it is to know yourself for thousands of years. I invite you to join me for conversations with artists, creators, scholars, spiritual teachers, writers, and humans of all walks of life to discuss these big questions together, to engage in a dialogue around what it is to live fully, to map ourselves, to know ourselves, to grow our compassion and listening, and to explore together our highest possibilities. Welcome. Welcome back to Mapping the Self. I'm so excited today to be hosting Marie. Marie is a dear friend of mine. We actually did a 300-hour yoga teacher training together ages and ages ago with Noah Maze. But prior to that, she's done a million things. I'll let her tell you about her magnificent life. But she has about over 1,000 hours of yoga certifications. She is a jazz dance teacher, a mat Pilates instructor. You worked for Cirque du Soleil or something? You need to tell us more about that. I'll let her explain in a minute. But all that to say, she's an incredible creative. She's a dancer. She's an incredible teacher and just a beautiful woman. And I'm so excited to have her. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you, Selena. I'm so glad to be here.
I know you've mentioned Cirque du Soleil to me before, and I actually don't know what you did for them.
Well, you know, my story of me being French, moving to the United States in 2007 is because I was a dancer. I was brought onto a show in Las Vegas. I was not brought into a Cirque du Soleil show, but I came across, obviously, a lot of the French community in Las Vegas that happened to work in Cirque du Soleil. And eventually, after a few years, I won't go into all the details. I started from Los Angeles after moving there to scout and cast people, talented artists out of LA for special events that would take place in Las Vegas. And so that's how I started, because I was, it's a small community. You start to know people. And so I started to work like this. I did special events. I was just production coordinator. And then in 2013, I was called back into Las Vegas for a bigger project just to help out for the creation process, and eventually was casted back into it. Had to start dancing again. I was so resistant to it during the first rehearsals. I was like, I don't want to go back to dance and stuff. I'm done. I thought I had closed that chapter, and eventually went back to it, became again the captain of the dancers, and spent 2 amazing, wonderful years. And eventually fully ended my dancing career. I mean, that was my story with Cirque du Soleil. Then I continue to do a lot of consulting and show production for special events or one night off for shows in multiple areas of the world. And that was such a great school. I mean, I learned from watching the best of the best in every department, as far as stage production, set design, costumes, makeup, and musicians. I mean, you name it. It was really a wonderful time in my life, for sure. And that taught me so much into the transition and obviously my yoga teaching path eventually, because I've always been so obsessed with movers and movement. And I've always been like an observer, and being taken into the backstage of Cirque du Soleil with these athletes and performers that are like the best of the best was, wonderful. And I think so much of my teaching now is inspired by it, because of what I witnessed and because of what I learned from them and also applied to me. That's my thing with Cirque. It's still like a big passion of mine to create shows, live shows, and be surrounded by movement. I don't know. I think it's whatever modality of movement that it is, it's so healing to not only the performer, but to the watcher too and the observer.
How do you think that performative, because I know I've taken class and I've seen you in action, and there's nothing performative about you as a teacher. You're such a teacher who's in service of students. So how do you feel the creativity of your years with dance and production and stuff has influenced the yoga teaching? Because it's definitely not in a performative way, but I can see the flavor of it.
I think for me, it's not in the performative way at all, like you say. it's more to communicate that deep love of movement, that deep passion of the intricacy that movement has and the patterns that bodies can have. And also just to show, for me, it's all about unlimited potential. I just know what human bodies are capable of. And I think what really came down to in my teaching is that I want to share, and with my student, I really want them to believe that they are capable of doing anything. And I would love them to get rid of all the preconceived ideas that they have and believe that their bodies are limitless, because I truly believe so. And of course, you have limitations and stuff, but I would like their approach to be like, yeah, I can do anything, and play and have fun and enjoy. And I think that comes from that performing world without being performative. Like, have fun, man, have fun. Like, you're having fun on stage, like you've been a dancer too. Like, when you go on stage and you dance your heart out, if you actually enjoy your dance, it's going to show tenfold. So it's the same for me in the yoga practice or in the movement practice. If you enjoy yourself, like, it's only going to benefit your mind and your life and everything that's going to be taken out of the mats.
I mean, ultimately, all of this is to live life with more joy. And I think the reason so many practitioners fall away from the practice, or they have yoga guilt about not doing enough asana, or they get too obsessed with pose goals, is they've taken the joy and the play out of it. And it becomes, I'm doing yoga to get good at yoga. I'm doing poses so that I can be able to do these certain things. And then that's going to change the way I feel about myself. And it's all like coming at the practice almost in like an attacking energy in a weird way of the self, even like, oh, I need to lose weight. This will keep me thin enough. This will whatever. And then the joy isn't there. But when you approach movement, all movement at yoga, asana, Pilates, dance, just from a place of, I'm going to have a really good time and use my body as a playground today, that's a very different relationship with the self.
That's what I'm really trying to transmit, for sure. I mean,
I think you do it very well.
Thank you. I'm trying. I mean, it's always something we aim toward, but I will always remember, because people also sometimes assume, oh, you were a dancer, you were a gymnast, blah, blah, blah. You could do it. It's innate or natural. Well, I mean, I can tell you guys that it was not natural to me. I was, I guess, a talented dancer because I was really good at acting. And that's what saved me out of the technique, because I was never a good technician. So when I entered the yoga world, and that happened later in my dancing career, when dancers would bring me to class and I started to explore and discover the practice and see what it was about, I did not connect right away because I was not good at it at all in the way of asana. I didn't know how to move my body in those ways and stuff. So dance did not help me. So I really also empathize with students that are approaching the practice later in life and that feel sometimes quite lost at the beginning. And I feel like I have so much compassion, and because I've been there. It doesn't matter if I was a dancer with Cirque du Soleil. I was like you, exactly. I know where you're going through. I had fear too. I had this too. I know. So I really want people to feel like they're limitless and it's fun. And I always say that when you're 5 years old and someone asks you to play doctor or princess, you didn't think twice. You just went on for it. You were into character, ready to go, right? And so when we are adults, we just lose so much of that. We are losing so much of every aspect of joy in life. And we put labels on ourselves, not even talking about society putting labels on us or others, but we put labels on ourselves because it's the comfort zone also.
I was talking to a yoga student last night, and this might upset someone, and I'm going to say it anyway. We're so obsessed now with all these external validating things, like I'm a human design projector, blah, 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 Gemini, Sagittarius, Vata, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, we're not even internally referencing. And I'm not saying you can't look at any of that stuff or that it's not helpful. So if I just made you really mad, take a breath. I understand those things can be helpful, but if you're always, I knew that would get you. If we're not always externally referencing like that, how do you attune to inner intuition, inner wisdom, inner knowing when you're always like, well, I'm this way. It says that I operate best this way. It's just putting more constrictions on yourself, more pigeonholes around yourself. And it's like, what do I think? What do I feel? What do I want? I don't need to look at a document that I entered my birth date in to tell me how to behave.
So true. It's so interesting.
Sorry, friends.
I will take a breath. I love that.
They've just signed off. They're like, bye.
But I love all those things. But yes, I mean, come on. Sometimes we need to get back to our intuition and ourselves and just dig a little bit deeper beside whatever everybody's trying to tell us. But it's interesting because I will always remember when I was teaching a lot in studios, I always like to push the envelopes. I mean, my classes are very much all levels. I will always include everyone. But if I see an opportunity to like push a little bit, I will always take that. And when you teach all levels, you'll always have people that are ready to go. And we did crow in the class. It was not a peak pose. It was just offered as a transition. Let's do crow, whatever. Like half of the class flew up. And at the end, one woman came to me and was like, I just don't do this. I don't like to do this. And I'm like, fair enough. I think you're missing out. Sorry. And it's not about the performance of the pose. Who cares about it? But it's what you learn along the way and the journey and the mental like liberation of like, hey, I can be on my hands, of like, I don't know. I was like, you're missing out. I'm sorry, whatever. But yeah.
Especially because there's ways to do it even with total support, like depending on what your abilities are. There's ways to practice crow stuff in a chair, like you can literally do it in a chair and there's always an option.
So many ways to explore your bodies in different ways. And Ketona yoga says that a lot of like, you never grow if you don't get out of the comfort zone. You're never going to grow. I mean, you can keep doing whatever you're doing. It's fine.
Well, and the deep irony, I think, as yoga practitioners and teachers is oftentimes people are good at something, quotation marks, because you can't see a video of us in yoga. And so they do that thing all the time. They're hyper flexible. And so they're always in their depths and their poses, or they're naturally really good at handstands. So they handstand all the time, but their forward bends look atrocious. They're like rounded through their upper middle back and but it's a guy who can pop up on his hands really easy. And we go to the places that we're good at because it feels good to be good at something. But the thing is if you want to get into classical definitions of yoga, that's not yoga because you're in your habit and your first nature. You're in something that is innate in you and a natural ability that you have. You're not challenging yourself. Like, the Bhagavad Gita has that line about sleeping during the day and walking at night. And the text isn't telling you that you need to become a night walker. It's telling you to go against your habits. And that's how you develop consciousness. So I always tell students, like, if you're hyper flexible, I'm going to prop you up and I'm going to not let you go in your depths all the time. If you're this, we're going to play the opposite. You do everything fast, slow down. You do everything slow, go faster. You never like a warm room, go to the tropics and practice. Like, do the opposite of what you always do because every technique you accumulate gives you another piece of yourself.
And usually it's not working.
And if you come in and just keep ingraining your habits while you're in a yoga practice, like it's a little bit like, what's the point? You're just deepening the grooves in your neurology instead of introducing something that makes things more expansive for you. Okay, I ask everyone, and to me, it's starting to get funny asking it, but it literally says in the intro, it's a show about self-mastery. And then I'm increasingly like, there's no such thing. And still, I ask everyone, because I think it's also a really pragmatic question. Will I keep a calendar or whatever? What do you think self-mastery looks like, or mastery of a skill?
It's obviously not the perfect answer. It's just the answer that comes to me. But for me, it's all about embodiment, being in alignment with what you do, who you are, what you say, what you think. I mean, that's another question. But, for me, it's all about embodiment, being a master. That's such a big word of your time, of your practice, of, I don't know, the saying, Noah Mazet would always say that, like, it takes like 1,000 hours of doing something to become a master. Like, I don't know, there are like few steps to go to become a master at a certain skill. And obviously, yeah. But I think it's all about embodiment, practice. What I teach is what I practice, or what I practice daily is what I teach. I'm not trying to be another person when I teach. I'm trying to be authentic, but it's all about embodiment. Am I walking my talk? Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
I think that's a wonderful answer. I think it's a beautiful answer. It's 10,000 hours. It's from Malcolm Gladwell's
10,000 hours, not 1,000.
10,000 hours to master a skill. I was like, no, we're not there.
Yeah, no, not yet.
I really love that as a definition because I think integrity is such a big thing. And for me, integrity is like if you don't have to hide it, if you're the same person you are when you're alone as you are when you're in public spaces, if you don't have to lie about it, if all these different things and embodying what it is you're teaching, embodying how you present yourself, like it's those things being in alignment. I think that is something that is a level of self-mastery. And I think that that also requires that you are willing to evolve things as you go. I know for a lot of teachers, we can get stuck teaching a certain way or selling a certain type of program or class, even though it doesn't align with us anymore because it's what we were known for. And I think it's really important. We've both been in this game for a long time to recognize that sometimes you have to be willing to lose people to stay in alignment with yourself, to not keep selling a program that you don't believe in anymore. I mean, I just went through this. Anyone who follows me knows I got really quiet for a few months about yoga stuff, like after I got injured. And also just like I have a PhD studies in yoga history and philosophy, and I've practiced since I was 12 years old. Like I know that stuff. And the deeper I went into certain texts and lineages, there was things that I was like, I actually don't believe this. Like, I don't want to be liberated from a human life. I don't perceive being a human being as problematic. And I think it's a gift to be celebrated, not a problem to be solved. And so why am I teaching a text to my students that says that their humanity is a problem? And so I got into a little bit of a place of crisis of like, okay, how do I run my teacher trainings, keep teaching when there's these things that I don't feel like are in alignment? And I had to take several months to sit with those questions. And I have the answer now for myself. I can still teach those texts and things from an academic perspective and let them choose for themselves. Like take my word for nothing and practice everything. Here's some ideas, go play.
I love when you say that. Take my word for nothing and practice everything.
I heard it from Naveen. It's a Naveen statement.
It's great. I love it.
But I think we have to be willing to evolve. And I think there's a lot of rigidity in the yoga world. Like people get really zealous when something has been working for them and then start to decide it's the only way. Like we see this so much with people criticizing each other on online spaces about what's yoga and not and what's authentic or not. And I don't feel like that's helpful.
I've never gotten into these conversations, to be honest, because I feel very disconnected. Because for me, it's all about division. And, it's kind of like the opposite of what yoga is. But for me, it's always like about the gray area. I'm never going to tell you like my way is the way. I'm never going to tell you like black or white answers. I will tell you most of the time, I don't know. This is what I know. And like you figure it out yourself, what works for you. I feel like there's always propositions that will work for some and not for those. But if it works for one, it works for many others. I think it's human nature that loves to divide anyway. So obviously the yoga world hasn't been untouched by that. But as for me, I will always envision that every practice is better than no practice. But as far as teaching it and transmitting to students, I would always say, like what you say, that's why it's so brilliant. Take my word for nothing and practice everything. Go out there, explore the world and explore what's out there and given out and to see and make your own things out of that. Make your own teachings out of that. And once you embody it, you can transmit it and give it to others and share it to others.
When we get too attached to certain techniques having to be the answer, then I think what happens is when they quit doing the magic that they were doing because we've changed, our circumstances have changed, we end up throwing out yoga as a whole instead of being like, oh, maybe I just need another technique or a different kind of practice in this season of my life. And I think that's why a lot of practitioners and teachers fall away from the practice. One of the reasons is because there's been an expectation on it that it's giving you some certain experience. And when that experience changes, you think the practice isn't worth it anymore. And this happens a lot with new students. Douglas Brooks, one of my teachers, Dr. Professor Brooks, he always says that when you start a yoga practice, it's like counting your prime numbers. And hold on, if you hate math, don't turn off the podcast yet. The early prime numbers are very predictable and they're close together. It's kind of like you're climbing this mountain and they're really quick changes and you're having big impact from the practice. But the higher the prime numbers get, the more uneven they are and the less predictable they are. And that's where a lot of people fall off practice because they're not having these big gains anymore and big experiences every time they're on the mat. And then they go, it's not worth it. And Douglas always says, like, that's the part that's the most important part of the journey is that part when the gains are uneven.
It's that analogy of like wanting to break a stone in half. You keep hammering it down 1,000 times and it doesn't break. And the 1,001 time you hit it, it will actually break in half, finally. Do you think it's the last one that actually did that? No, it's all the stored work all the time. And the plateau in the practice is the best time, actually. It's the most learning curve. I love it. I always tell my students, like, hang on, it's the best. Hold on. And then the breakthrough happens and you're like, yes, okay, I told you.
And on the other side of it, it's so much richer. And you start to fall in love with the so-called mundane moments where there isn't something big happening. And that's where it's so much more sustainable. You don't see the fruit of a practice. I know, and some people are going to go, I've had huge benefit. That's not what I mean. Hang with me again. But the big fruit of the practice is 20 years in. It's 30 years in. It's, you can meditate for 6 months. That's not the amount of meditation that totally changes your life. You're going to see the fruit of that when you're 65, if you're 20. Like the biggest fruit of that lifetime of practice. And all the physical stuff we're talking about too, I'm going to quote Douglas again. He always says, let your practice speak for itself in the ways in which you offer your attention and your respect. And that's something I just hold in myself all the time as a practitioner and a teacher is like, it doesn't matter how good my arm balances are if I'm an a-hole. Oh, I did such a good job not cussing. I don't have to make this episode explicit today.
I'm glad you opened the door though.
But
now
like,
again.
Never. Like every third episode, I have to put it up as explicit because I accidentally swear. So some of the episodes say they're explicit and some don't. And it's so bad because we're just having sweet conversations about yoga or whatever. But my little sailor mouth will pop up and then I have to make the whole episode
It's fine,
explicit.
Selena.
And it's never the guest.
Thank you for opening the door though. This one might just be.
Yeah, I'm like,
I love
shit. There it is.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting to see the shift in students when, and I'm including myself in that, when we understand that it's all about presence and who you are outside this freaking mat. Who cares about your perfectly aligned handstand?
And I want to touch back on something you brought up because I think it's really important. People, and it fits in with what you were just talking about it wasn't the last strike that broke the rock. Like there's no such thing as and suddenly moments. Like people see someone get famous and they think it happened and suddenly, ignoring the 25 years of piano lessons or whatever. And I think rightly so, people look at women like you and I, because let's be honest, we fit like stereotypes of being, I'm just going to say it, we're beautiful women and we're tall and we're thin. You have the like blonde thing going on top of it. And like you have a gorgeous practice. Like I'm just calling a spade. But it's easy to look at like Marie's Instagram and think, well, what would she know about pain or suffering? Like she's an aloe yoga model and she's this and this and this. And I would really encourage you. Erica Mathers talks about this and she'll be on the podcast in a couple of weeks in her book, My Body, My Best Friend. But she talks about how when you see someone like that and you're envious of them and you start projecting that the reason they have what they have is because of these objective things about them, the way they look, etc., to stop and remind yourself that they have a story just like you do. They have pain. They've had painful moments. They've suffered and they have still had to work really, really hard to get to the place that they are. So like assuming that Marie's always been able to put her foot on her head and assuming that she's always had all these things.
Wrong person.
Yeah. She's like, no, I can't do that. She's like, no, actually, I can't do that now. I love it. You're like, excuse me, I still can't. But I just think it's an important thing. Like, it's easy to look in this Instagram age at like a yoga teacher and go, oh, well, she's not going to be the right teacher for me because she doesn't understand pain or whatever. And I get that kind of assumption as well. And the ironic thing is both Marie and I work with a ton of women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, injured people. Like, it's not what you think. Do you have anything else to say about that?
I agree 1,000%. It's like the amount of assumption I get on the daily because of my Instagram, because I like aesthetics and I like to create artful pictures, and I don't follow trends of what yoga teachers should do on the social media platforms of like teaching tips and tricks and blah, blah. For sure, I get that. And it's, oh, well, I mean, I used to want to convince them otherwise, but now I'm like, oh, I feel like people will be drawn to me if they are my people, like, and I'll be drawn to them as well. It's attraction. But we all going through stuff in life. We all have experiences that made us who we are. And yes, it's easy to look at the glossy pictures, but oh my goodness, it's funny, but it's what it is. I'm not complaining. It's what it is to be some kind of stereotypical yoga teacher criticized the past few years for being who we are. Like, sorry, I was born that way. Can't do anything else. But interesting. I was on a shoot one day for a brand, and it was in LA in January, and LA gets cold in January. 8 a.m. was right out of makeup, and I was like past 35 years old already. So your body is starting to change. You start to feel the toll of the years. And I also feel like my body specifically has more mileage than a regular person because I was on stage so much and I performed so much. I used it more than the regular person that probably hasn't been an athlete or a dancer. And I arrived, I didn't even have time to warm up. I was like, come on, guys, you could leave me a little bit of time to warm up, actually, literally warm up because it was freezing. And they're showing me the mood board and they're like, okay, so handstand eagle on this little marble edge with water fountain coming down. I mean, it was like the most ridiculous setting. It was stunning, but, and I literally said like, sorry, wrong person, can't do that. But yeah, what they were assuming, right? No, sorry, I can't do it. I thought you hired me actually because I could be more relatable. So I can do a triangle if you like.
And then they're like, be super unrelatable. Stand on one finger. I love that you spoke about our bodies changing too. I think that's so important. Like for those of you that don't know, like I hurt my neck really badly a few years ago. Unfortunately, I got caught up with a really abusive teacher and hurt my neck really badly, nerve damage and whatnot. And I couldn't practice at all for almost 2.5 years outside of meditation and breath work and light Pilates to stay strong. And I'm a very thin woman. I've always been really thin, but I gained a lot of weight and my body size changed for the first time in my entire life. And I thought that I had healed my relationship with my body until that happened. And I realized how many more layers there were when that like body dysmorphia flared up, when all of this stuff came up around movement, because I had created so much of my identity around being a good mover and around being able to do certain things in my yoga practice. And suddenly I couldn't do them anymore. And I really panicked. I was like, no one's going to take yoga from me because I can't do handstands anymore. Like I can't teach people how to do a handstand press anymore. And I fell into this like bizarre moment of crisis that in retrospect seems really silly because no one was taking yoga from me because of those things. They were taking yoga from me because I'm an oral storyteller and a historian and all these other things about me that are way more interesting than my body or my practice. And yet we are embodied beings. So there was the trauma and the emotional pain and stuff around all of it. It's been really interesting to navigate, but I'll be 42 next month and things do change. And I'm not saying you should just let it all go and be like, well, there's nothing I can do about this. Like keep strength training, keep whatever. But if you don't love yourself and your body now, you won't love it in 10 years. And it's okay for your practice to evolve with you.
We're such an ageist society. It's so painful, but it's a privilege to be able to even move, whatever age you are. But now take into consideration that you're taking years on your back on top of that. We are so lucky. And it's actually so beautiful. And to actually be able to find the joy of a kid later in life and to never lose that is wonderful. And I think it's like just as much as, and I really blame society for that and the standards that are put on women. I mean, guys too, I guess. But I mean, how wonderful it is when we can actually try to liberate ourselves from it, at least for a moment, and feel what it feels. Oh my God. And we're like, yeah, oh my God, I'm vibrantly alive. And that's what matters more than anything else.
Being vibrantly alive is the most important thing. And on that note, I think it's a really good opportunity to share with you that Marie and I are leading the Illuminate Yoga Movement and Meditation Retreat February 25th to March 3rd in Uvita, Costa Rica at the stunning Selva Armonia, which is this very cool immersive jungle resort overlooking the famous whale tail. And the reason I love retreat so much is because a retreat is way more than a vacation and it pays you back 1,000-fold. And here's how. It pays you back 1,000-fold because you make different decisions when you leave. And those different decisions open up new opportunities. And then you make new decisions based on that. And so in my experience, every time I go on a killer retreat, it continues to feed me and pay for itself for years to come. What's included in the retreat is 8 days and 7 nights of magic, your accommodations of your choice all the way from rustic cabins to private luxury villas, all organic farm-to-table meals, smoothies, and elixirs, airport transfer from San Jose International Airport, super rad sponsored gift bags, evening sound baths, waterfall jungle hikes, beach bonfires, and a whole bunch of other beautiful things. And we would love to welcome you. With that, Marie, we were just talking about ageism and sexism and the way we feel about our bodies and how that relates to yoga practice. So I'd like to go back into that conversation.
I was saying that aging is such a privilege. We take our bodies for granted so much. And I was telling you that, every day we are bombarded by beautiful imagery that are taking us into a loop of comparison and stuff, when truly what we have is such a gift to experience this life in all its grand way. We just take it for granted. And we know it's so crazy because when we get a cold, which is just a little cold, we know how desperate we are. So we just need to never forget that and always move like it's the last day, man.
And learn to take joy in our bodies, whatever they look like. And because all bodies are beautiful and there's not one kind of body that is better than other kinds of bodies. And this is something really personal. And I just decided while you were talking, I'm going to say it. I do try to be honest on this show. I told you guys, I told you I'd gained some weight and I was feeling different than I've ever felt in my body before. And I'm very aware I'm still very thin. So to anyone listening that's feeling activating, everybody's body experiences are valid and we all question our worth based on our bodies at some point or another. Anyway, I have a massive scar down my abdomen from multiple abdominal surgeries. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and I've experienced some colon and intestinal issues. And now I've had the weight gain and stuff. And Italians are notoriously body positive. I love it. Everyone's just bodies are beautiful and everyone runs around in whatever they want. And a man that I've been getting to know one day said to me recently, you just have the most beautiful, perfect body. And the reaction inside of me was violent. I was that's not true. Why is he saying that? This, do you know what I mean? I just had this visceral reaction. And I think I responded with, no, I don't. I have this massive scar on my stomach and blah, 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 blah. I couldn't receive it. And then later I felt really emotional about it the next day. I was why did I react that way? Because he's so genuine. This man is so genuine and so kind and he meant it. Do you know what I mean? And in retrospect, when I did some healing work around it with myself in the coming days, I was it's perfect because it's me. And your body's perfect because it's you, with the scars and with weight gain or weight loss or stretch marks or whatever, to take awe in the fact that I have a body and that my own sweat is my personal holy baptism and my tears, and to just embrace myself and receive and let someone think that my body is perfect and receive that has been, I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's just been something really tender that I've been holding for a couple months.
And it's so interesting because we finished my Greece retreat and it was all about receiving, because we have a lot of wishes when things happen to us and sometimes they don't because we're not even ready to receive. And just allow yourself to dwell into that suspended moment of that gift that he gave you. Oh my goodness, it's so great. Yeah, I'm so glad that you eventually turned around onto the initial feeling that you had, right?
It took me by surprise because it was such a genuine compliment in a safe space. And it wasn't some random man being like, you have a perfect body, you're hot. It was in the context of relationship, and it was kind, and the fact that I had such a reaction to it when he was not objectifying me, he was extending kindness, and it was real and true for him. And the fact that I rejected that and tried to argue with him about it. No, I don't. How dare you?
Yeah, you were probably laughing about it and brushing it off, right?
Yeah, I was just like, whatever. But my God, if we could see ourselves like that, the way that other people see us encapsulated, and our inner beauty, our inner illuminate, that's what illuminate is. It's something that shines from within. Our inner illumination, our kindness, our respect, those are the things that shine through and make us so beautiful. And we start to, I mentioned this earlier, you see someone who has something you want. And Erica Mathers writes about this again in Your Body, Your Best Friend, and she'll be on the show in a couple of weeks. But you see someone that has something you want, and then instead of realizing that it's skills, habits, etc., that got them that thing that you could develop, you attach it to it's because they have black hair and green eyes, and because they're curvy and they're whatever. And you start thinking that it's about that. And then it becomes something unachievable, to your point. And then you start criticizing yourself of, well, the reason I don't have that is because I don't have a butt. I have a flat butt. And that's the reason that I can't fall in love, or I can't have the whatever I want in life. And it's an act of self-objectification. But instead, if we can go no, I'm inherently noble and worthy, regardless of the shifting state of my body. And I'm going to love my body however it is, and implement habits, goals, ways of being that allow me to achieve the things I want from my life. Then we're playing a different game.
It's all about self-love, right? And self-respect, I would say. Because at the end of the day, all these stories would only be deflection or projection, right? But if you truly learn back to appreciate, I would say, before love, because love is such a big word, but appreciate yourself, allow yourself to receive from others, from their outside perspective, and you start to finally embrace back who you are and embrace the process of your life, of your path. Because also everybody's not only different outside, but inside, and our life path are so diverse as well. So we can't ever compare anyone's journey or even judge anyone's experience.
No, you have to walk the path yourself, or it's not yours. Anthony Machado writes too, what have you done with the garden that's been given to you? My teacher, Martin Shaw, always says, every single person is given a little patch of land, metaphorically, that's theirs to cultivate. And he always says, don't despise it because it's not as grand as you would have wished. What are you going to do with the little patch that's been given to you? And of course, we all come in with different levels of privilege in the world and whatnot, and I'm in no way denying that. And what do we do with the patch that we've been given? In what way do we cultivate that? And we can't always be happy, but we can be fulfilled and pursuing things that fulfill you.
And I always come back to our contentment. Happiness is such a big word, or it's fleeting. But contentment is sometimes all you need. Gratitude, presence, all these things, right? But I think the physical practice is such a medium to lead us to that. For me, the asana practice is just a tool. It's a tool to guide us to all these lessons that are within. No one needs to preach to you. No one needs to tell you. You will know. And through movement, you will know. You'll get your answers. It's interesting. It's so cathartic, the practice, the physical practice, right? Because and it's interesting because also most of practitioners start with asana because, it's the West and it's gymnastics and calisthenics and a lot of movement. And then you're drawn into deeper sides of yourself because the lessons are within. No one needs to preach to you. No one needs to tell you anything. You'll get it. It comes. But it comes with practice and embodiment and patience and self-compassion.
That inner transmission is the most important thing, and you can't get it from a book or from a teacher. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have teachers or books, because you should. And that most important transmission is an inner transmission. And it's like such a critical thing to get and grab a hold of, and to not be looking for a savior in a teacher. Teachers are just other people trying to figure their shit out, just like you. And we're just passing on the tools that we have in this moment. It's not because we are at a higher level than you, and I don't personally think any teacher is. Like, I don't treat human beings like gods. So even Khenpo Rinpoche and different like Tibetan monks that I know that I have friendships with, they're human beings. And at the end of the day,
perfectly imperfect.
And I love how you brought it back to embodiment, because even just there, and I want to reiterate, like, embodiment, we don't necessarily mean that you have to be able to do a physical practice, right?
Of course
have
not.
An embodied experience or whatever, just to be really clear. Just for the listener, I know you and I know that, but so that they don't think that that's what we're saying. And like Marie's saying, using asana as a tool for connection with the self is so potent if that's how we're using the tool. Because if you're using asana to always override your inner knowing and override your inner experience and to always override negative sensations or whatever, then it becomes something else. It's not, because embodiment is full acceptance of whatever is rising in your soma, which is like the whole experience of the living organism. It's not, embodiment doesn't mean feeling grounded or feeling good. It can mean that, but it's really just full acceptance and presence for what's arising. And that's what asana can offer us if we're approaching it from that place.
And for me, it's all also beside the physical, like embodying your values, embodying your integrity, like walking your talk. I think that's how you say it. Really being in alignment, or at least aiming to be aligned with who you are, who you.
I loved what you said earlier when you were like, and I often tell them I don't know. That to me, that's like applause. That's why you're a great teacher, because you don't need to have all the answers and you don't need to peddle meaning to anyone.
I also think that's why you and I trained so much. I had so many conversations also with teachers that would say, why do you do all these trainings? What is it about? First, why would you invest so much? You can teach with whatever you already have. And for me, it's because we are going to co-lead teacher training very soon together. And we probably have listeners that are wondering, like, but I already have my 200. Like, why do I need another one? I think it's so important to stay curious in your practice. This is why you will never get burnt out if you stay inspired. And I think you can learn from any point of view and remaining curious. And I think it's part of staying in alignment, because at one point,
I've been studying every year since I don't even know when.
Yeah, because I think at one point it becomes inauthentic if you don't keep digging. You're on autopilot, and it's easy to teach a 1 hour asana class, and just spit out a script without really knowing. And I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm just saying, like, why would it be a good idea to keep training? Because you're exposed to more and different perspectives, and I think, and different lineages and different ideas and different point of views as far as anatomy and philosophy, applied philosophy. Stay curious in the search of self-inquiry also, and all that will make you, first, the better version of yourself, which I think we all are aiming toward that, and a better teacher, because I think we become better teachers with experience and with that constant quest. It's one of, how society wants you to always have more, get more. I don't apply, of course, like training and studying to that. But in a way, if you want to be a master of a skill, like, you have to want more and know more and get more. I think it's so important.
When Drez was on the show, when I asked him what self-mastery was, he said there's no such thing, but you can become a masterful student. And I was like, there it is. But yeah, I was like, that's the perfect answer. Best answer I've ever gotten. But like, really, I giggle a little bit, because I can't tell you how many times a week yoga teachers will tell me, quote, I'm already certified. And I'm like, cool, I have thousands of hours and finished PhD studies in yoga, and I feel like I don't know anything. So it's cool you're already certified.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
And it's like, just on the one hand, if you're constantly taking courses, because I had this conversation with one of my students last night that has graduated. And I said, listen, if you're always taking courses because you think think you're inadequate and you lack confidence, that's a wrong reason to be pursuing more certifications. I was like, you need to just start teaching and you will build confidence through teaching, not by getting more certifications. You'll be just as insecure. And on the other side of that, like there's so many different lineages and ways of knowing. Like it always cracks me up when people think Patanjali's yoga is the only yoga or the yoga, when there's so many lineages out of India and Tibet and different places. And there's so many ways of knowing. And if you don't want your teaching to get stagnant, you have to keep feeding yourself. And it's such a vast ocean. And if you want to be a teacher that can guide people of different walks of life and stuff, it's so important to keep steeping yourself in the practice and in education. Like most teachers I know have multiple 200-hour trainings in addition to their advanced trainings. Like Ali Van Fossen took my 200-hour when she was already a YouTube celebrity. Her yoga channel had blown up and she was so successful and she was a great teacher and she came and did my 200-hour.
It's really, really important.
And it's fun. I'm so shocked by how often my world is blown apart by another training I took or something I learned. Like in the last year, I've learned about lymphatics with Tiffany Grujicic. I did 3 Katona mentorships after I finished my 200 hours of Katona. Like you only need to do 1. I did like 3 or 4 of them. I can't even remember now. Like just because I like being in the learning environment, you know, I love listening to other people's perspectives. And I also tell yoga teachers all the time, you have to do more than train in yoga. You need to look at art and read poetry and take a cooking class, like Abby always says, and develop other parts of yourself so you have metaphor to play with and a deeper understanding of what it is to be a human being. Because ultimately that's what we're addressing through our yoga, is like how to be a better human and to have joy in life, to let life be a joyride as much as possible in the conditions of pain and suffering and all the things that come up in life. I think a lot of people suffer in yoga because they're using it to fix something and to like heal something, to bring us back to some pristine state that never existed. And it becomes this like endless, dissatisfying, painful chase instead of like, actually, this is a tool to help me cope with the difficulties of being in a body and to make it more joyful in the inevitable cracks that are going to happen along the way.
It keeps us humble and on our toes.
Life has a way of doing that, doesn't it?
Yes, for sure. But at least it gives us tools and we're more equipped.
Taking care of your nervous system, asana to bring joy and playfulness, to keep your joints healthy and young. Like there's so many, the benefits are so endless to this practice. It's really so sweet.
And community.
Well, Marie and I have a 200-hour yoga teacher training starting in February. It's live streaming, so you can attend from anywhere, and the hours are set up for both US and EU students. You have lifetime access to the recordings. You also get my 200-hour virtual pre-recorded teacher training that I filmed over the course of 3 years as a bonus, which is packed with a ton of wonderful materials, sessions with Douglas Brooks, sessions with a therapist on somatic experiencing and trauma-informed yoga. There's anti-racism in the yoga space lectures with one of my students in Atlanta, a whole bunch of really great stuff. So you get that as a bonus. And if you want to do that training and come to Costa Rica with us, there's a package deal on the 2 programs. So you can get some in-person training hours with us. We're really excited about it.
So excited about it. I love it.
Really excited. So if you want information about that, you can message either of us. Marie's information is in the show notes, her Instagram handle, her website. Obviously, you guys know how to get in touch with me. And if you put in mapping the self, when you go to check out at the yoga teacher training, something special just might happen so that we will know that you were listening to the show. A little benefit might slide your way, either to the retreat or the teacher training. Marie, do you have anything else you want to say to the people?
Well, I want to say thank you for having me on your platform. It was a pleasure, as always, to discuss with you and talk with you. You're such a brilliant woman that it's always very, I don't know how to express it in English, but I feel always enriched by being in your presence. So thank you for that. Yeah, I want to say, well, thanks for listening and getting to the end of our conversation.
It's such a delight to have you. I feel the same way about you. Marie's the person I can send messages to when I'm frustrated with things I see happening in the yoga space, or if I'm frustrated with something I'm going through as a teacher, because there's a lot of ups and downs as entrepreneurs. Or she's such a brilliant, brilliant soul and so kind. And I'm really honored to have you here.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being here, Marie. And I will see you guys next week.